everybody. And thank you so much in joining us for another episode in our influencer series. Today we have an amazing guest with us from and joining us with Workplace AI, and that is Merrick Rosenberg. Welcome, Merrick.
So good to be here, Thomas.
Thank you for joining us. So we want to firstly just do a little bit of housekeeping, and thank everybody for joining today. And if in fact you were trying to join yesterday, we weren't able to get the LinkedIn Live links working for us yesterday, so we've decided to do it again today, and it seems like everything's working this time, Mark.
We are ready to go.
So Merrick founded Team Builders Plus. And back in 1991, and he reinvented how people learn about themselves through personality styles when he started his second company, Take Flight Learning, in 2012. He's also the author of 8 award-winning books about tapping into the power of personality, including The Chameleon and Which Bird Are You? Merrick has worked with more than two-thirds of the Fortune 100 companies. Wow. And under Merrick's leadership as CEO of Take Flight Learning, his company has been selected as the New Jersey Business of the Year by New Jersey Business Magazine and has repeatedly been named as one of the fastest growing companies and the best places to work by the Philadelphia Business Journal. He is also an award-winning filmmaker and with his personality styles movie Bird Brains Inc., which won 23 festival awards, including 4 for Best Short Film of the Year. Wow, that is an impressive list of accomplishments, Merrick. So
We've been
congratulations.
having fun along the way.
Yes, yes. Now, you know, the interesting thing about everything you do, and I love it because it's something I like to espouse, and that is fun, right? Having fun in what you do. And because you have found a way to really, how do I say this, illustrate people's personality traits in a fun way. I think you've illuminated what has been, I don't want to be negative, but it's been kind of dull with
Yeah.
the way the profiles have been portrayed. And I think you've brought fun to it, and you've brought creativity to it, and you've really created illustrations and characters, right? That really help people better understand both the personality traits that they may or may not have, but that others have in a way that's sticky. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that the way we've learned about personality, it's just very clinical, it's very psychological, and it's honestly not very interesting. I mean, I would read books about personality. I'm like, okay, this doesn't interest me. So if I if I'm not interested in it, this can't be something that has broad appeal to the world. And to me, if you just it's like anything. If you take something and you make it easy and you make it fun and you make it memorable, then people use it. But the problem is if you can't even remember it, all these alphabet soup of assessments that are out there, if you can't even remember it, how are you using it? I would spend a day, and I used letters for a long time, and I would go back and talk to people 6 months later and they'd say, which one is the D again? I'm like, you're killing me. I spent a day with you like 6 months ago. How do you not remember this? But it just was so fleeting. And look, you can't use it if you don't remember it. And we had to do something to make it sticky, as you said.
Yeah. Well, for those that don't know, and I've got to believe that's few and far between. But with respect to the basis of what your methodology is around, which is DISC,
Yep.
did you want to give like a little bit of a highlight of what that is and then how you've overlapped with that and then
Sure.
created what has become much more memorable and usable going forward?
Disc has been around for a long time. It's been around since the early 1900s. And the interesting thing is, it was in a book in 1928 and never trademarked or copyrighted. And so it just exists in the public domain. I mean, people all the time say, what do the disc people think about the birds? And I'm like, there are no the disc people. There are people who use disc, and there's lots of assessments out there, but there is no the disc assessment. And so for me, it does parallel the four disc styles, but the reality is the four disc styles parallel the four styles that have been around for thousands of years in ancient Greek civilizations, ancient China. I mean, cultures all over the world have had four styles. And the reason is there's four brain quadrants. It's not magic as to why do we keep finding the same four over and over again. We may rename them different things, but there are four. So let's see what we'll put you to the test. How about that? So we'll start with the eagle. See,
Sure.
Thompson didn't know that he brings me on his show, and then I'm testing him. That's what
Uh,
happens. So so let's take the eagle. When if you were to think of someone who has the traits of an eagle, a person has the traits of an eagle, what would come to mind for you?
Leadership. Certainly somebody who probably cuts their own path, right, and goes their own way. Probably doesn't take direction particularly well. Uh, Probably a little unorganized at the detail level, likes to fly at 30,000 feet and doesn't come down that often except to eat.
Yeah, and you see what's interesting is you get it. They live at 10,000 feet. They're strategic. They're big picture. They like to be in charge. You don't see
Yeah.
flocks of eagles flying in formation. They're independent. They're risk takers. In the workplace, they care about results. And here's what's interesting. I don't have to teach that. It's intuitive. You immediately know. All right, so let's do another one. Let's take the parrot. So you have the parrot style. If somebody was a parrot, they're probably quiet and shy, right? Right,
Oh, they're
probably not,
more
right?
social, right? I thought the parrot was very social.
Exactly. Right now, if you think of a parrot, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, so somebody that wants to be in groups, somebody who really enjoys communicating, somebody who's always, I wouldn't want to say the life of the party, but is always instigating the party and is really kind of a leadership from that perspective. They're the one that brings people together, and they're the ones that really make sure that everybody else is enjoying themselves and gaining from that opportunity. They tend to be leaders, but within that kind of category.
Yeah, they're very empowering leaders. They're motivational leaders. They're like, you
Absolutely.
can do it. We can make it happen. They're visionary. They're the folks who are like, it's crazy, but it just might work. Like they have ideas that are just out there. And they're fun, they're social, they're talkative. I mean, they're the eternal optimists. And once again, it's intuitive, right? You don't think of a parrot as quiet and shy. You immediately think of the parrot as they're talkative, they're social, they're the storyteller. All right, let's do another one. We'll slow the pace down a little bit. Now we've got the dove, universal symbols of love and peace, right? What it comes to mind when you think of the dove.
So this is somebody that always wants to get along with everybody, right? And this is somebody who's kind of the glue that keeps everything together. The person that everybody goes to for advice. Very usually knowledgeable and very easy to talk to. Doesn't spend a lot of time leading because they're more making sure they're the glue that keeps everybody together.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, it's all about peace and harmony and cohesion and collaboration, and they're empathetic and they're there for you. But once again, it's just intuitive. Like the beauty of that is you didn't have to memorize that. It's like it's already intuitive, right? Last one, the owl. When you think of an owl, what comes to mind?
Yeah, so the owl is in some ways the most important because he or she is the person with all the details. They're the ones that actually make sure that things work, but they are not upfront. They're usually quiet, introspective. They're thinkers. They're strategic, but they bring more to the pick to the game than really anybody else by way of the information that we need. These are the people that collect the data, organize the data and make it really shine in terms of what the rest of us are trying to promote and do.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's like if they're going to do it, they're going to do it right. They have a
Yeah.
process, they have a plan. Like if they were hanging a picture on a wall, they've taken out the laser level and the the ruler, and there's one nail, they put it in, it's perfect. The parrot, remove a picture from a wall where a parrot has hung paintings, and there's like 8 holes. They're like, nope, that's not right. Nah, no one's gonna see it anyway. What's the difference? It's behind a picture. They just, they like just they go for it. But you can see the difference between the parrot and the owl, the eagle and the dove, and we're not just one of them. We're a combination of all of them. And
Sure.
but we probably have one or two which are like the primary style. Like for me, my primary style, I'm the parrot is my primary style, but I got a little eagle. I got a little guy. So I have a little bit of eagle in there too. So where, somebody can be an owl dove, an eagle parrot, dove owl. What do you think? If you had to pick one, what would you think is your
Is
primary style?
mine? I'm probably similar to yours, except the other way around. So I'm probably more the eagle with a little bit of parrot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And look, you can be any combination. And
Yeah.
and and here's the thing. When you're in your style, it feeds you. When
Yes.
you are working in your style, you could do it all day. A parrot goes to a networking event, they talk to people for hours, and then they go to the bar afterwards because they're like, I got so much energy, I got to get it out. If an owl did that, they'd be like, I need to go back to my hotel room and just return to factory settings, be quiet
Right.
for a little while. I'll see you later for dinner. But when you're in your style, it's easy and it feeds you. When you're out of your style, it drains you. And this is one of the challenges we see with leaders is that leaders often create an environment for themselves in which they will thrive, but they don't necessarily create an environment in which their people will thrive. And then what are we doing to our people every day? We're just exhausting them. The most successful leaders are the ones who create environment for their people where every individual gets their needs met and can be their best self, as opposed to, hey, I'm an eagle. We have fast-paced, decisive environment. We make quick decisions. We take risks. We make things happen. It's like, yeah, but how's that working for the doves in your organization? Probably not very well. So we have to think about how we're impacting the people around us too.
So how does that work when it comes to organizationally making the different teams impactful by way of the output that you're expecting?
Yeah, the thing is, if you know who you have on your team, first off, you can make sure you capitalize on the strengths of everyone on your team. You'd
Mhm.
put the parrot in a role where they're going to thrive. You take the owl and place them in a role where they will thrive. I mean, even think of just like managing change. There's different components to driving change in an organization. Maybe the parrot comes up with this big picture idea and it's exciting. And then the eagle focuses you and says, all right, let's focus on the results. What are we trying to achieve? The owl dissects it, takes it apart, creates the plan. The dove makes sure everybody understands it, everyone's comfortable. You can have the best plans, but people support what they help to create. Doves want to make sure everyone's happy and has buy-in. When you have a team and you tap into each of those strengths, for example, you could drive innovation. But if you were an eagle, you had big picture ideas. You're like, all right, people, let's do it. But you don't really have the plan. You didn't get people excited and you didn't get buy-in. Maybe it was a great idea, but it never really went anywhere. So the most successful teams, leaders understand the team dynamic and they know how to get the best out of everyone, which is allowing them to be their best self.
Is it fair to say that some areas of the business require more of this or that than they would the others? That is to say, in your leadership team, just to poke potential opportunities at it. You want more eagles? I don't know. Or in HR, you want more doves. And I
Oh,
know I'm
yeah.
boxing things a little bit, but do you want to think like that when you think about your organization?
Here's the thing. You don't necessarily have to think like that because people self-select to the role they're in. I just was a keynote speaker at an HR conference. And at our booth, it said, which bird are you? And people came by and they guessed, oh, I'm the dove. And we'd give them a dove sticker. They'd put it on their badge. We went through a giant stack of dove and parrot stickers. Hardly used any eagle stickers at all, and some owl stickers because there are some comp and benefits people at the HR conference. But that's it. Doves and parrots are drawn to HR. I spoke to a group of engineers not long ago. You can absolutely guarantee it was overwhelmingly owls. How many
Right.
parrots were in that room? One. And you're talking to him. Like there were no parrots at all. It was like that's, but it wasn't like they self-selected. They only hired owl engineers. They've People self-select to become an engineer because it resonates with their style, and that's often the owl. Same thing for IT and finance, engineering draws owls. When I go in hospital systems, I see eagles all the time. They're the doctors. The nurses are the doves, and that's why they often bang into each other because they have very different styles.
Mhm.
Parrots are in sales and marketing, and so people self-select. But I will say, here's what's interesting. Go to the senior leadership team, and it is true. When I first started my very first company back in 91, was using the styles, started learning. I learned the disc model in 94. Team Builders Plus, there were about a half a dozen team building companies in the United States at that point. And that meant that I was 25 years old, I get to do team building with Fortune 100 teams, senior leadership teams. I would never be allowed as I've been doing team building for 2 years to go into the senior leadership team of a Fortune 100 company, but no one had 10 years experience. So I got to work with the most senior level people right out of the gate at the beginning of my career. And overwhelmingly, they were almost teams of all Eagles, overwhelmingly Eagles. Today, I've worked with about 1,700 CEOs in the past 7 years, and it is about half Eagles, half everything else. So in about a 30-year period from 94 to today, it's that shift has, yes, it's still about half Eagles today, but it was almost all Eagles 30 years ago. And the most important thing to realize is that your style in no way determines how successful you will be as a leader. It does, however, determine how you're going to go about being a leader. And dove leaders can be just as successful as eagle leaders, parrot leaders can be just as successful as owl leaders. But that's the one team I would be careful. You don't want to say, oh, I'm going to hire eagles for the senior leadership team. There's amazing dove CEOs, Howard Schultz from Starbucks. I mean, you see like Herb Kelleher from Southwest Airlines, who it's all about their culture and their environment, and it's been their secret sauce for so many years.
Amazing.
Have you
Amazing.
seen that? Can you think of like certain roles that you just clearly can see that, yeah, this is going to be an owl role. This is going to be an
Sure
eagle
can.
role. And it just
No,
draws those people.
I sure can. And what you can also see, and this is even more helpful, is for those folks that for whatever reason um, didn't self-select and perhaps fell into a role one way or another that doesn't actually suit their characteristics and their profile in the way we've been discussing, and they're not happy.
No,
And that,
it's hard. Yeah, I
yeah,
will tell you, where I see that a lot? Family businesses
right.
where someone started the business and then the child comes in, inherits the business, and they're not wired for it. I worked with a accounting firm not that long ago where this is exactly what happened. And father started the business, son inherited the business, son is a parrot eagle, goes to school to be an accountant, hates it, just hates being an accountant, but loves managing and leading, loves doing presentations, getting in front of clients. He's like, hey, get us a new client. I'll go in. Like, let me be the sales guy. I'll go in and talk to them. Like, I love it. Let me do the presentation as the CEO. I mean, but he followed a path that didn't resonate with who he was, and it didn't feel very good. But then he found the role and he made it his own, and he stepped into his power. But early in his career, he told me he was not happy.
Right. Is that one of the opportunities that organizations can look to first by way of making sure that the teams match and that we've got folks that are actually living their best by way of matching those traits against what they're doing?
Yes, and I would also add that you want to make sure that people are in a role where they can shine. And when you're displaying your personality in a very comfortable, natural way, it's going to be easy for you. Your best self comes out. It's not a struggle. It doesn't take effort. But there is an anomaly there. And it's important to recognize that sometimes you have an outlier. You have that one person who's very different from the rest of the team. And that person might just be the most important person on the team because they think differently. They break you out of an existing paradigm. They get you to do things you wouldn't have usually done. So if you are only looking for style, you may screen out your innovator. And you have
Mhm.
to be careful about that because that person who's, it's like, which one doesn't belong? Like that person may absolutely belong and may be the one that transforms your team.
Yeah, so we're talking about the disruptor.
Yeah. Sometimes the disruptor is the person who's different from everyone else because they
Yeah.
think differently.
Yeah, they open up the walls so we don't get stuck in the same box every day. Can you think of some amazing examples? You've given us a few already, wherein the observation and the realignment of some of these characteristics by way of teams and folks on the team has really made an enormous difference to the success of the organization.
Well, what's interesting is you could look at organizations that have broken out of the mold of the other organizations in their industry because they have a different style. Right? I mean, I mentioned Herb Kelleher, Southwest Airlines is a good example of that. Right? Here's airlines. I mean, during during the pandemic, here's a group where here's an organization that stuck together. People weren't flying so much, and they still generated revenue and were doing okay because they created such a fun environment. Look, you get on a plane that's an American Airlines, a Delta Airlines, a United Airlines. It feels different. Even just getting the safety instructions feels different than getting the instructions from a Southwest airline flight attendant. That they've
Right.
created a very parrot dove culture that is very family oriented and community oriented. And that is different than all the other airlines who have a very owl. Here's our process. We have a system. We stick to the system. Here's our rules. Follow our rules. And
Mhm.
Southwest like, nah, we decorate the gate, we have fun, like we board differently, we give the instructions differently. So when you can see sometimes breaking out of the mold makes you shine even as an organization because you're different than everyone else.
Right, right. You know, it's funny you mentioned COVID, and I think about the impact that COVID had, both yeah, especially in the workplace, because it dramatically threw everything into the air with respect to where we work, how we work, when we work, all those good things. And I think it really made a mess of some people's comfort zones by way of how they work, right, and how they want to work and associate with their team and get success. And I think that continues to reverberate. And I don't think it's settled. I think we're now coming to kind of like a maybe it's a hybrid model, right? More than it was before. But even with that, that balance seems to be shifting even as we speak. And I
Yeah,
think a lot of it's got to do with that.
yeah, I remember during the pandemic, I'm the parrot
Yeah.
and I travel a lot. I speak at conferences around the world and I was speaking at conferences virtually and it was hard. It's hard to you don't get the same energy from an audience when you're talking into a camera versus you got 500 people in front of you. And my wife is an owl and she's like, I'm good. Like I got this. And I remember we invited friends over and a couple and we're sitting in the backyard and we're talking to them and we're social distancing and they're she's the parrot and she travels a lot and he's the owl. And I was asking and I asked her like how are you doing? This must be hard. And she's like I just need to go somewhere. I don't even care where I go. I just need to get out. And I looked at him I'm like how are you doing? He's like I've been planning for this my entire life. Like, no one walks in my office. They don't bug me. I can get things done. I could do this. So different people responded differently based on their style. Some people really enjoy working remotely. Some people feel like they want to be back in the office. They need to be with people. But it speaks to our style plays a very big role in how you like to work and engage with others.
Would you say that that's reflected in the culture of the organization as well, ultimately?
It often comes from the top, right? You get CEOs, you get a senior leadership team, and look, if you had a senior leadership team that is all parrots, they might be saying, first of all, good luck with that, but your staff meetings are like squirrel, right? Like all over the place. But you had a group of all parrots, they'd probably be like, we got to be here. That's how we create energy and create the environment, and it's fun, and that's how we get good ideas. But if you had a group of owls, they might say, look, you walk into an IT department. I've walked into into large IT departments where everybody's just got their headphones on, they're focused, they're writing code, and they're not really talking to people that much anyway. And they go grab their lunch out of the fridge and they sit down and they eat it, and then they put the headphones back on and they're good to go.
Yeah.
And they're like, I could work from home. And if you had a senior leadership team of owls, they might say, it's really working for us, and it's fine. So that environment of what's okay, whether you are hybrid or not, or we want everyone in the office or not, is a part of that comes from our style and what we think we need to do and how we think we need to work together.
And I would guess on that basis for individuals, to the extent that A, you know your own personality well enough to understand where you're going to work well, and then B, you're able to determine that of a potential employee or employer, right? Then you'd be able to put two and two together and see if it comes up with four or if it's a little short. And you know, I think of some of
Yeah.
the major organizations, you know, from the JP Morgans and some of the others that are obviously run by primarily Eagles. And they're telling everybody, you know, you're coming back to work whether you want to or not. And I think for many people that's okay, but for quite a number of them it's not.
Yeah,
And I think it's
that's right.
important to those things.
Yeah, and what, what's interesting is we're seeing a lot more Dove CEOs than I've ever seen before.
Right.
And I
I
can
would,
tell I'll tell you why I think this is happening. You know, if you I go back and it's one of the things I ask when I'm at a conference, I say, raise your hand. You picture a couple hundred people, and I say, raise your hand if your father worked at fewer than three companies throughout his career. How many hands do you think go up?
all of them.
Almost every single hand in that room. Then I
Yep.
say, raise your hand if you've worked at three or more companies in your career. How many hands do you think go up?
Same ones.
Almost all of them. Exactly right. And I say, here's the difference. I think about my father. He literally worked at one company his whole career, and he didn't always come home and was happy about his boss or what's happened that day, but he wasn't quitting it. This is a job. Deal with it. You know what? Take Gen Z and millennials too. If they don't like the environment, you know what they do? They'll go find a better environment. They don't just quit their manager. We used to always say people don't quit their company, they quit their manager. Now we're saying they quit their culture. And I applaud that. Look, if you're not happy and you're not treated well and you don't feel like your environment resonates with who you are, go find a place where you can be comfortable and successful. And this generation is, in fact, doing that. And guess who cares about the culture and wants you to be happy and wants you to work in a place where you're comfortable and can be your best? Which style? It's the Dove. And there are more Dove CEOs that I'm seeing that are emerging today, especially in Gen Z, that are starting these kind of really innovative startups and the younger millennials, tons of Dove CEOs. And I think we're going to keep seeing that. And I think we're going to see turnover rates that are linked to the environment that people, do you love it or do you not? Does it resonate with you or does it not? And so, look at companies like JP Morgan. Do they lose people because they say you must come back? Probably. And they may
Mhm.
lose good people.
Yeah, but I think you know, and every business is different, and the industry that they reflect by way of financial is different in and of itself by definition. But I think that the workplace is changing um, rapidly, and all these
Yeah.
things are having a huge impact. And now technology with AI and every other new technology that's coming along with it is transforming how we work, where we work, and if we want to work. And the older generations, and I count myself in that category, we don't communicate particularly well with especially the younger millennials and the Gen Zs. Not at all. We do a terrible
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
And for myself, I really
Well,
have to work at it.
yeah. It's interesting because here's a place you can use AI. Like let's
Yes.
say you're coaching and even remove generation. Let's just look at style. Uh, because that's the beautiful thing about style. An eagle is an eagle.
Yes.
If someone is an eagle in in Philadelphia, they're an eagle in Los Angeles, they're an eagle in London. I mean, they're an eagle. Although I do kind of jokingly say when I'm in New York City, I say, you look, you take a dove from New York City, move them to Kansas, they're an eagle. Like, there's a difference. New York is its own little world. But but besides New York, and by the way, I say that in New York City, and they're like, yeah, that's true. So, no offense to New Yorkers, they agree with me. But what happens is let's say I have to give feedback or I'm running a performance evaluation session with one of my folks. I'm an I'm in and my person that I'm in, I'm a parrot. All right, but what do I do? Because this person is an owl with a secondary dove. What do I do with that? You could literally go to ChatGPT, go to, so many of them out there, and just say, I'm about to run a coaching session for someone who is an owl with a secondary dove. Um, what are some of the questions I should ask that person based on their style? How should I communicate to them? What are the do's and don'ts of talking to an owl dove? And it will tell you. I have spent so much time working with ChatGPT, for example, that it really knows the eagles, parrots, doves, and owls, and it can give you insights. It would probably say, look, as a parrot, if you gave them your style, dial down your energy a little bit. For the dove part of that person, make a connection. For the owl, provide specific feedback, not just generic big picture information, provide examples. And it's so you could even use AI to help you to guide conversations, or a salesperson who's about to meet someone, about to present to to a person with a very strong eagle style. What are some do's and don'ts? It'll tell you. And so you could be using AI to give you tips and ideas on how to improve communication with the people around you.
100%. I couldn't agree with that more. And we do a lot of that now ourselves. And we do have the ability to build disc into what we're doing, even by way of email responses. So it'll
Yeah,
pick up immediately on the behavior pattern of the individual we're in a meeting with through our system, and then
yeah,
create an email response and follow up accordingly. And
yeah. It's amazing.
that changes everything.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I mean,
now,
imagine saying, take this letter that I wrote for an owl, now rewrite it for a parrot, and it will
yes.
do it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your services and what you do and how you bring them to bear and how you become as impactful as you have been on behalf of organizations and your clients.
Most people in the disc world and Myers-Briggs, and it's kind of like a one and done thing, right? It's like disc, oh yeah, we did that. Or Myers-Briggs, yeah, we did Myers-Briggs. Learning doesn't work like that. Learning is not an event. Learning is a process. You have to reinforce it. And so we've actually have 8 different training programs based on the styles, and the birds are the through line in all of them, from emotional intelligence. An emotionally intelligent eagle is different than an emotionally intelligent dove. They have different strengths. Instead of just saying be emotionally intelligent, let's look at you and help you to be the best version of you. We have a session on sales, a session on innovation, conflict. We have one for coaches, and it's all about how do you use the styles to be successful in your world, throughout your role, throughout your life. We have certifications. We have 8 different profiles as opposed to just one. There's a leadership profile. What do you look like as a leader given your style? There's a sales profile as a salesperson. How are you most likely to sell? What's likely to trip you up in the sales process? Where are your strengths? Where are your challenges? So we've just built a whole ecosystem around styles and training and certification and profiles. And it's really making a difference. It's an amazing thing. Almost every day of the year, we get a letter from someone that says how this changed their life, it changed their workplace, it changed their job or career. Which is why we do it. It's making a difference.
Well, I think, in large part from my perspective, certainly as I've thought more about it and gotten to know you and your system and the birds, I've come to realize how much easier it is to understand and immediately relate that to another individual or environment with individuals, in a way that now I can react much more positively than I had been previously.
Yeah,
And it's simple. If we got a team of owls, if we got a team of doves, what's the case? What is it
yeah.
we're trying to do as a team and which applies best? And that changes everything. And it's so simple.
Yeah, I mean, you walk it. We These guys are on, hundreds of thousands. We have literally hundreds of thousands of these out in the world, and there's one on everybody's desk, right? It's like
Sure.
they go through the training, and you walk into someone's office and you see this on their desk. I always say, look, you walk into the Eagle, be brief, be brilliant, be gone. Tell them what you need to tell them, and you're out. That's it, right? But if you walked into their office and saw this, and you jumped right into the business, all right, here's what I need. They'd be like, whoa, whoa, how are you? How's it going? How you doing? Just checking in with you. Like, and maybe you want to build a little rapport with them first, check in. And the thing is that they become these visual symbols that are so easy. You don't walk in and just see the letter D on a desk. It's the reality. And it's just to have these visual symbols of the styles, it's a constant reminder of, yeah, I just got to use this all the time. And the beautiful thing, and I think that I maybe doesn't surprise me anymore when I speak at conferences. Look, I'm talking to corporate America. And I'm talking about how to use this as a leader, or as a, depending on the conference, or as a salesperson, or as a team member. And then I go and I sign books. 95% of the questions I get during the book signing. So my wife is an owl dove, right? Or I got a son. He's a parrot, and I'm an owl. Most of the questions are about their family. And I
Yeah.
love that because what does it mean? It means they're seeing the value and they're applying it in their life. Even though I talked about it from a work perspective, they're sitting there thinking, all right, what is my husband? What is my daughter? What's my wife? Like they're thinking about the styles and how they play out. And that's you can't beat that.
And I think back at it, I wish I'd known more about this when my my daughters were younger, because I could have applied things a lot more effectively than I did. I know I never won an argument. That hasn't changed. But
Yeah, that's not the dove. That's probably the eagle or the there's a little eagle
yeah.
playing out there. They like to win. I'll tell you the one sentence I hear more than any other sentence. I should name a book this at some point. It always starts with "I wish I knew this before," and
Right.
it's and then it's finished with "I wish I knew this before I started working." I've had CEOs who have said, "I wish I knew this before I became a CEO. I wish I knew this before I had kids." I think the winner though, "I wish I knew this before I got married." That is hands down the winner of all of them.
They should have built that into those first marriage meetings you have with your minister or priest or whoever.
Yes.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, because we're all very different. I've been in sales and sales leadership and development all of my career. And you develop one of your books called The Chameleon. You develop the ability innately to just sort of reflect the environment you're in. So you immediately take on the characteristics, within reason, of the environment you're in by way of the personalities that you're speaking to. And you just pick that up. And I didn't even realize how innately you do that by way of the skills you develop based on the experience that you've had. And I do that, but I can tell you this, in applying just the simplistic thinking of those characters, right? In addition to what I'm doing that so much better already after all of those years of just picking it up on my own without thinking about it.
Yeah, there's obviously we have learning and along the way, but if you can utilize knowledge with intention, then it starts to be used. In fact, my next book is personality intelligence, and it's what I found is that we've taught styles for thousands of years. And in
Sure.
some cultures, you have all these archetypes like the warrior, or the analyst, or the jester, or the healer. And they're very static. And the same thing is true with the letters, right? The D, this is the D, this is an ENFP, this is someone who's red in some color system. And this is the description. Here's their strengths, here's their challenges. But what I tried to show people, and it's coming out in the fall, it'll be out this fall, and it shows people a trajectory of here's what you look like in the unevolved state of your style. Take an unevolved eagle. Eagles want to win, right? But take
Mhm.
a child who's an eagle. They're playing Monopoly, and then right before they lose, they're like, I don't want to play anymore, and they leave. Where maybe they lose and they say, well, not in my book, I didn't lose. Like you cheated and I didn't lose because they can't handle losing. But then we
Mhm.
evolve, and as adults, we're at level two. At level one's that unevolved state. Level two is this typical state. Look, we all have strengths. They come out most of the time. Every now and then we push them into the red zone. Eagle assertiveness becomes aggressive. Dove caring becomes smothering. Owl accuracy becomes perfectionism and they can't get things done. Parrot optimism becomes unrealistic. And so in level two, the typical state, our styles, they drive our success, but occasionally they get in the way. At level three, you have mastered your style at the
Mhm.
highest level. You have taken your style where it serves you. And it is the secret sauce of your success. But at level four, you not only have mastered your style, level four is the chameleon state where you have mastered all of them, where you have taken your style and taken it to a level that now you can adjust and adapt to any situation and deal with anyone. When you hit that place, sky's the limit.
Right. But I mean, I think you might feel like you've achieved that level, right? But I think at the same time, when you start to apply and think about it and do it on purpose, that is to say, really pay attention to it in a way you may not have before, you realize there's still more ground to be gained, and there's
Yeah,
still more opportunity in front of you, and there's still more to learn. That never changes anyway. But
yeah,
there's always more to, and the one um, um, stick in the mud, if you will, is that disruptor, right? So when you do meet that disruptor, and that's a decision, isn't it? So as a leader, if that's the case, and you now have a disruptor in your team, and you recognize him or her as being that, is that going to be impactful, or is that going to be a challenge and more of a
yeah.
problem than it may be worth? And you've got to think that through, but that takes a little bit of enlightenment.
Yeah, it's acting with intentionality, like
Yes,
really consciously being aware of your behaviors, how you're impacting your own success and how you're impacting others. But look, you take someone like Steve Jobs, he's an example of clearly a disruptor in so many
yes,
ways. I mean, just
sure.
impacted the world in such a vast number of plethora of ways. I mean, here's a guy who was a disruptor, but he had what he called the reality distortion field, which was he would have this crazy vision and then he would push and push and push, but he would burn his people out. Um, and he was at the highest level of the Eagle style, but he also could push too far. And, had an HR director following him around. He would fire somebody and then they'd go, "You're not fired. Just come into it. You're not really fired. It's fine." I mean, it's just like who does that? So I mean, but that was the problem is if that once in one sense he had mastered the eagle, but in the other, he also lived at level one, which was the unevolved state where his style worked against him. He got fired from Apple at one point, right? It not only served him, but it also worked against him. So sometimes we move and flow between different states at different times in our life. You don't just master it. Done, mastered my style. You're gonna have days. There's moments.
If you don't, you're not human.
Yeah. My goal, and I talk about this, is to have more masterful moments. It's not that you've achieved it and you're there. It's just to have more of them continually, and so that your style is really driving your strengths.
Well, I always say living on purpose is the goal. And when you're able to do that and have fun at the same time, now you're really achieving things, right? And that's the key. And if you're not having fun, then you're in the wrong room.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
And that always comes back to knowing your personality on the basis of the room you're in and the impact you can have on that basis. So,
Yeah.
how do people reach out to you, and what's the nature of your services, and how do they take advantage of your great experience and all the books you've written and the courses that you give and the webinars that you put on?
Yeah. Well, of course, the books, as one would expect, you can get them on Amazon or any bookseller. They're out there. But for speaking, it's merrickrosenberg.com. And for training, certifications, profiles, the work that's done by Take Flight Learning by my organization, it's takeflightlearning.com.
Nice. And is there anybody in particular on your team that they can be reaching out to as well, or is that directly through you?
Yeah.
You connect
If they went
on media?
Yeah, if they went through, they just went to our website and they filled as a request for info, fill out the info form, and we'll tell us what they're looking for, and we direct it right to the right individual that can help them out.
Excellent. Are you using AI in that context yet? I poke.
We are not, but that's a very interesting application that we should be exploring.
And we're doing the same thing, by the way, and by way of exploring and bringing that into our system as well. And it is something that people enjoy. But
Yeah,
again, it's that balance of giving them the information they need so that they can then take that next step. And now I want to speak to somebody and put it into play, and not
yeah,
pretending to be a human in that process when you're not.
yeah. We're talking about AI now, and like, wouldn't it be great to have like you click on either the eagle, parrot, dove, or owl on our website, and you can have a little conversation with them, like ask them questions, then they answer in their style. Like the eagle just answers in one word, like, "What do you think of this?" Good. That's all they say. And the parrot's like, "It's awesome." And the owl's like, "Let me explain to you why it is good." And the dove's just like, "I'm so glad you asked. That warms my heart."
That's perfect, Merrick. Well, listen,
Hey,
I really enjoyed our conversation today.
It's so great to be here with you and just talk about the world in which we're living. And you're doing such great work and making a difference in the world around you. So it's great to talk with you.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your time and thank you for coming back after yesterday's session didn't come off the way we hoped it would. But thank you everybody for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you the next time when we have another influencer. But today's was one of the best, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you, Merrick.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful weekend, and thank you. Bye bye.